I called him to tell him his mother's grave had been vandalized. No answer. I tried again, straight to voicemail. Then I tried from the house phone. It rang once, then silence. That's when it hit me, my own son had blocked my number. The boy I raised after cancer took his mother. The boy I worked 2 jobs for just to pay his tuition. Blocked me, like I was a nuisance. I stood there in the cemetery, phone trembling in my hand, and I realized, I wasn't just forgotten. I was erased. After Marjorie passed, it was just me and Caleb. He was only 9 when the cancer took her, and I remember holding his little hand at the funeral, his knuckles bone white from gripping mine. I promised her right there at her graveside, that I'd raise him right. Don't let him grow cold, she had whispered to me in the hospital bed, too weak to hold her own son's face. Make sure he knows kindness. Teach him to be soft with the world. And I did my best. Lord knows I tried. I took the early shift at the auto shop and the graveyard shift delivering newspapers so I could be home when he woke and again before he went to bed. I packed his lunches, double-checked his homework, sewed name tags into his jackets. Every Sunday, we made pancakes shaped like animals, badly. I always claimed mine were turtles. He insisted they looked more like exploded shoes. We laughed. We always laughed back then. Birthdays were hard without her, especially those first few years. So I started a tradition. Caleb would get a letter, written, from Mom. I'd stay up late, trying to remember how she spoke, the little phrases she used. My sweet brave boy, I'd begin. I'd talk about how proud she was, how much she watched over him. I'd leave the envelope under his pillow. He never asked how I got them. He just believed. That blind faith, it broke me and healed me at the same time. He was a good kid. Polite. Always said thank you, even when I made those terrible tuna casseroles. When he got older and friends started coming around, they'd compliment how respectful he was. You did good, one of the moms said once. It's rare to see a kid hold the door open these days. I'd nod, half proud, half worried. The world doesn't always reward kindness. Caleb was smart, too, clever with numbers, always building something out of scraps. I still have a little wooden box he made me in 7th grade. The lid doesn't close properly, but I use it for my cufflinks. I told him once that I wear them only on special days. I never told him that every time I opened that box, I felt like I had done something right in this life. I wasn't perfect. I had my temper. There were days I'd come home too tired to listen. Nights when the silence in the house felt like it would swallow us both. But I always tried to show up. Always made sure he knew he came first. I skipped raises to make every one of his parent-teacher nights. Saved for 3 years to take him to Washington, D.C., because he wanted to see the Lincoln Memorial. When he got sick with pneumonia at 15, I slept upright in the hospital chair for 4 days straight, afraid that if I closed my eyes, something would happen. I'd already lost one piece of my heart, I couldn't lose the other. We used to sit out on the porch some nights, sipping hot cocoa in mugs far too big for his hands. He'd ask about Mom, and I'd tell him stories. The way she danced to old Motown records, how she always burned the garlic bread but swore it was crispy on purpose. Those stories stitched her back into the fabric of our home. And I could see, in his eyes, he kept her alive with every laugh, every memory. Then came high school. The phone started buzzing more. He had a new group of friends I didn't know. The talks on the porch grew shorter. Still, he hugged me goodnight. Still, he asked me to proofread his essays. I told myself, he's just growing up. Don't take it personal. So I didn't. I let him go little by little, believing he'd always find his way back. He got into a good college, full of pride, I was. He was the first in our family to go. I remember holding the acceptance letter like it was a treasure map. We did it, I said, more to her picture on the mantel than to him. I drained my retirement fund, took out a second mortgage, told him, don't worry about loans. You just focus on your future. And I meant it. I watched him walk through that airport terminal with a suitcase and a smile, waving back at me once before disappearing into a crowd of newer, louder, faster lives. I didn't cry that day. Not until I got home and found one of his old shirts balled up in the laundry. Still smelled like his cologne. That was 4 years ago. And now, he won't even pick up the phone. It didn't happen all at once. That's the cruelest part. If Caleb had just cut me off in a single, clean break, maybe I would have understood. Maybe I'd have been angry or shocked, but at least I wouldn't have wasted so long waiting, hoping. The first sign was small. Subtle. His responses started shrinking. Where he used to send full messages, little updates about his professors, cafeteria food disasters, or weekend trips, now I got things like, yeah, or, cool. One-word answers. Dry. Hollow. I told myself he was busy. College is stressful. He'd come around. He stopped calling me Dad in texts. Started saying, hey. No punctuation. Just, hey. Like I was some guy from work. I sent him pictures of the garden, the old truck after I finally repainted the hood, a video of the neighbor's dog chasing a squirrel. No reply. Just read receipts. Like I was shouting into a canyon and hearing nothing but my own echo. I remember one night in particular. It was a Friday. I made chili, like I always do on cold nights. I sent him a message, made your favorite. Miss you, kid. Never even got a response. I stared at my phone through the entire meal, letting the chili go cold. His voice changed too. When I did get him on the phone, he talked faster. Briefer. Like he was always on the edge of needing to be somewhere else. His laughter didn't come as easily. He used to laugh with his whole body, this sort of collapsing giggle that always made me laugh too. Now it sounded rehearsed, like someone pretending they remembered how. And then there was her. Madison. She came into the picture sophomore year. He never introduced her to me directly, I found out because she tagged him in a photo on social media. Arms wrapped around him, wearing my son's hoodie. I clicked through her profile. She was all selfies and sarcasm, captions like, I'd rather be sleeping and men are disappointing. A lot of inside jokes I didn't understand. And none of them included me. When I finally asked him about her, he seemed defensive. She's cool, Dad. Don't start, he said, like I was accusing him of something. I hadn't even said a word beyond her name. She never said hello when I called and he put me on speaker. Once, I overheard her in the background saying, just tell him you're busy, babe. He won't get it. He laughed. Not at her. With her. It's funny what you start noticing when things feel off. He used to send me pictures of the books he was reading or the meals he cooked. Now, all I saw online were party photos. Drinks in hand. Tongues out. Poses too slick for sincerity. I asked him about his grades once, and he brushed me off. I'm handling it. Stop micromanaging. That stung more than I let on. I wasn't micromanaging. I was just trying to stay in his life. Then came the money shifts. It started with small things, asking for a little extra, just in case. Then, it became expected. The messages were more like invoices than conversations. Need $400 by Friday. Rent stuff. No explanation. No, please. I sent it anyway. Every time. He never called to say thank you. He used to. Used to write me handwritten notes when I left $20 on his dresser in high school. Now he couldn't even be bothered to text. I told myself this was the pressure of growing up. That it was normal for college kids to push back, to want space. That he'd come back around. But the truth was, I didn't recognize the boy he was becoming. The last time I visited him, I brought groceries. Chicken breasts, rice, some of that expensive granola he liked. He met me at the curb, didn't even invite me upstairs to see his apartment. "I'm late for something," he said, glancing at his phone more than my face. I handed him the bags. "Just wanted to see you, son." "Yeah. Appreciate it," he said. No hug. No smile. Just that dull, half-there tone like he was humoring me. And that was it. He walked back toward the building, texting someone with both thumbs. Never turned around. I sat in the car a long time before I drove off. Watched other students walk by, laughing, arms linked, calling home. I wondered if they still talked to their parents. If any of them would forget the man who held their hand through every scraped knee and midnight fever. The signs were all there. I just refused to read them. Until that night, when my call didn't go through. Blocked. Not a missed call. Not bad reception. Blocked. I stared at the screen like it had betrayed me, not him. That was the night I stopped telling myself he was just busy. He wasn't. He was gone. It was parents' weekend at his college. I hadn't been invited. But that didn't stop me from going. I figured maybe he was just embarrassed to ask. Maybe Madison didn't want me there. Or maybe he was just overwhelmed and forgot. So I packed the truck, picked up a few pastries from his favorite bakery, and drove the 3 hours with a hopeful heart and a cooler full of sandwiches. When I got to campus, I texted him, "I'm here, thought I'd surprise you. Want to grab lunch?" No response. I waited in the parking lot, watching students embrace their families, laughing, pulling out chairs at those little folding tables under white tents. I saw fathers clapping sons on the back, mothers holding their daughters' faces and crying softly. It was like watching another life, one I used to belong to. After 20 minutes, I called. Straight to voicemail. Again. I got out anyway. Walked around the quad. Eventually, I spotted him, sitting on a bench near the fountain with Madison and 2 other students. They were eating, laughing about something. He had his arm lazily draped across Madison's shoulders, sunglasses on, head tilted back like he didn't have a worry in the world. I stood there for a moment, not sure if I should approach. Then, before I could stop myself, I called out, "Caleb." His head turned. Slowly. Like someone answering to a name they hadn't heard in years. When he saw me, his face stiffened, not surprised. Not happy. Just, tense. "Hey," he said. Not, "Dad." Just, "Hey." I walked over, offering the bakery box. "Brought your favorite. Figured you'd be too busy to make it home, so I came to you." He didn't take the box. Just looked at it, then at me. "You shouldn't have come." His friends went quiet. Madison looked up at me with that same expression I'd seen in photos, detached, mildly amused, like I was a subplot in someone else's story. "I just wanted to see you, son." He sighed, standing up. "Can we talk over here?" He pulled me a few steps away, just out of earshot. "You can't just show up like this. It's weird." "Weird?" I blinked. "It's parents' weekend." "Yeah, 4 people who were invited." The words sliced through me. I swallowed hard, forcing calm into my voice. I didn't think I needed an invitation to see my own son. He crossed his arms, shifting his weight like the ground under him was uncomfortable. "Look, I appreciate the drive and everything. But I've got plans." We were going to head out soon. To where? "I don't know, maybe Madison's place. Her family's hosting a dinner." I tried not to show it, but it landed. And I'm not welcome there, am I? He hesitated. That was all the answer I needed. I handed him the bakery box anyway. Just take it. Your mom's favorite too, remember? He took it reluctantly, holding it like it was full of something inconvenient. I stepped back, staring at him. What happened to you, Caleb? He didn't reply. I raised you better than this. That did it. He turned to face me fully, his jaw tight. Yeah. You raised me in a house where everything was about grief and guilt. You think writing fake letters from mom made things okay? You think working all the time and dropping off money made up for the fact that I felt alone most of the time? I stumbled back like he'd struck me. Those letters were to help you remember her. They were to help you feel like you were doing something, he snapped. I didn't ask for them. Silence stretched between us. Students passed by, glancing. I saw one mother whisper to her husband, probably sensing the tension. I nodded slowly. I'm sorry you felt that way. But I never stopped loving you. Not for 1 second. He looked away. I have to go. And just like that, he walked back to the bench, laughing again, slipping into conversation as if I had never shown up. I stood there, in the middle of that sunny, joyful campus, like a ghost. On the way back to the truck, I passed a group of parents chatting near the information booth. One of the fathers looked at me and nodded politely. You here with your kid? He asked. Not anymore, I said, my voice hoarse. Not really. I drove home in silence. Didn't turn on the radio. Didn't touch the untouched sandwich I'd made for him. Just watched the miles pass by and tried not to let my heart bleed out on the highway. When I got home, I took down the picture of him on high school graduation day, me with my arm around his shoulder, both of us grinning like fools. I put it in a drawer. I didn't throw it away. But I couldn't look at it anymore either. The betrayal wasn't loud. It wasn't a screaming match or a slammed door. It was quiet. It was watching your son walk back to his life and realizing, you're no longer part of it. A week passed before I could bring myself to call him again. Not to argue, not even to apologize, just to check in. I told myself maybe he'd cooled off, maybe I had caught him on a bad day. Still blocked. Not just my cell. The house phone, too. I even tried messaging him through email, the same one I'd used to send him utility payments and reminders about rent deadlines. Nothing. I was locked out. It was a few days later, while having coffee with Nora, the widow next door, that I found out something I was never supposed to hear. Ran into your boy at the market last week, she said casually, stirring her tea. He didn't see me, I think. Was with that girl. Madison, right? I nodded slowly. They were talking about apartments, she continued. Something about moving in with her folks for a bit. Said he didn't need to worry about bills anymore, since he was done relying on the old man. I just stared at her. My hand tightened around the mug. He said that? She tilted her head. I didn't mean to snoop. Just thought you knew. I forced a smile. No, Nora. You didn't snoop. You just told me the truth. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table with a folder I hadn't touched in months, Caleb's tuition account. Password protected, but I'd set it up myself. I logged in and checked the recent activity. There it was, a request to change the billing contact. From my name to someone named G. Holloway. I didn't recognize the name, but I could guess. Madison's mother, perhaps. I clicked around further and found a note he'd added to his financial aid documents. It read, "No further correspondence needed from previous contact. Future communication should go through Holloway household." He hadn't just blocked me. He'd erased me from the system. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling like maybe it could explain how we got here. I had given everything, money, time, heart, years I'll never get back, to give that boy a future. And now he was rewriting his life like I'd been a footnote. Later that night, I pulled out the old shoebox I kept under my bed. Letters. Birthday cards. Report cards. Even one of those little macaroni art projects he made me for Father's Day in 2nd grade. I sat on the floor, reading a note he'd written when he was 10, "Dad, you're my hero. I want to be like you when I grow up." And now here I was. Erased. Replaced. That night, I dreamed of Marjorie. She was standing in the kitchen, flour on her hands, humming the same tune she always did when she baked. I walked in and she looked at me with eyes full of knowing. "Where'd he go?" I asked her. She didn't speak. Just reached out and brushed the side of my face, like she used to when I'd come home exhausted. And then she was gone. I woke up crying. The next morning, I drove into town and asked to speak to the bursar at Caleb's college. A kind young woman led me to her office. She remembered me. I'd called more times than I could count in the past few years, always ahead of deadlines. "I need to update some things," I said quietly. "And remove my payment method." She looked at me, confused. "Is Caleb transferring?" I shook my head. "No. But I am." The drive home felt like a funeral procession. I wasn't sure what I was mourning more, the loss of a relationship, or the death of the illusion that it could still be saved. When I got back, I looked around the house. Everything here had once been built for him. The bedroom I'd repainted twice as he grew. The desk I bought secondhand and fixed up myself. The bathroom cabinet where I kept his favorite brand of shaving cream, even though he hadn't been home in months. I walked into the living room and saw his photo on the mantel again. I picked it up. "You don't want me anymore?" I said aloud. My voice cracked. "Fine. But don't you dare think I'll keep pretending I'm not watching." From that moment on, I saw things differently. Every email, every headline, every interaction with neighbors, it all felt sharper, clearer. I had spent years justifying his behavior. Maybe I was too overbearing. Maybe I had clung too hard. But no more. Now I saw it for what it was. Not distance. Not independence. A plan. He didn't want space. He wanted me out of the picture. Well, I could do that too. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. I waited a week before sending him the email. Just a simple subject line, "Need to talk." No anger. No accusations. Just those 4 words. He responded the next day, short and sharp, not interested in a guilt trip. "I'm busy." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I replied, "I'm not here to guilt you, Caleb. I just want to understand. One phone call. That's all I ask." He never wrote back. So I called the university one last time. Spoke with the student accounts department and explained that I had withdrawn as the financial guarantor. They confirmed he'd been notified. That was all they could say. 3 days later, I got a message, this time from a new number. It was him. "Why are you trying to ruin things for me? Madison's parents can't afford this semester, and now they're mad at me. You're making me look bad." No, "Hi, Dad." No, "Can we talk?" Just blame. Pure, unfiltered entitlement. I responded once, simply, "You blocked me. You replaced me. I'm stepping back, like you asked." A full day passed. Then came the kicker, "I didn't think you'd actually do it." That was when I realized, he never thought I had a breaking point. He assumed I'd always be there, no matter how he treated me. I was just the safety net he could cut and expect to bounce back. But even nets wear thin. I sat on the porch that night, watching the wind move through the old oak trees. I thought about everything Marjorie and I had wanted for him. Not money. Not prestige. Just goodness. Integrity. Kindness. And here he was, treating people like ATM machines, like props in his little performance of independence. I wasn't just hurt anymore. I was done. The next morning, I called Helen, a friend from church who worked as a legal aid. I need to revise my will, I told her. She paused. Are you sure? I'm sure, I said. I've been sure for a while. I just didn't want to believe it. She helped me schedule an appointment with a lawyer in town. Someone discreet. Trustworthy. Before the meeting, I spent the night going through papers, old tax returns, property deeds, savings accounts. It wasn't a fortune, but it was a life's work. A paid-off house, a modest retirement fund, and the savings I'd never touched, meant for Caleb one day. All of it was about to change hands. That night, Mrs. Langford from 2 doors down brought over a casserole. She always did that when she sensed something was wrong. She didn't ask questions, but she stayed for a cup of tea. We talked about her cats, her late husband, the weeds creeping into her walkway. Nothing heavy. Nothing serious. But when she left, she turned and said, "You're a good man, Henry. Don't let anyone make you forget that." I nodded, holding back a lump in my throat. Thank you. That means more than you know. The following day, I stepped into the lawyer's office with a folder tucked under my arm and 27 years' worth of heartbreak trailing behind me. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for peace. I wanted my final decisions to reflect the man I was, not the father my son had decided I failed to be. And if that meant cutting ties, so be it. The lawyer's name was Martin Wilkes, balding, kind eyes, smelled faintly of wood polish and mint. His office looked like something out of a 1950s courtroom drama, mahogany desk, green-shaded lamps, leather-bound books nobody had touched in years. It was quiet in there. The kind of quiet where your own thoughts echo louder than the ticking clock on the wall. He greeted me with a firm handshake and didn't ask unnecessary questions. "You mentioned updating your will," he said gently, gesturing for me to sit. "Tell me what's changed." I placed the folder on his desk. Inside were my property documents, financial records, and the previous version of my will, the one where Caleb was listed as the sole beneficiary. I had signed it 7 years ago, right after he got accepted into college. Back when I still believed everything I'd built would one day be his, with pride. "I need to remove my son," I said, my voice even. "And I want to set up a clause." Martin raised his eyebrows slightly but didn't interrupt. "I want it clear," I continued, "that if he contests the will for any reason, the entirety of my estate, house, savings, everything, goes directly to charity. Preferably a scholarship fund. Something that actually helps someone grow into a decent human being." He nodded slowly. "You understand that's a strong move. Irrevocable, once enforced." "I do," I said. "I've thought about nothing else for weeks." Martin flipped through the papers in silence, occasionally making notes in a worn leather notebook. Then he looked up. "This kind of clause is called a no contest clause. In many states, it's enforceable. I can draft the documents today." I took a deep breath. "Make it happen." As he worked, I watched the dust motes drifting through the sunlight that fell across his desk. I thought about how many afternoons I'd spent helping Caleb with his homework at our kitchen table. How I used to lay awake listening for his door to open in the night, just in case he had a bad dream. How I'd kept his mother's voice alive in our home, even when my own had grown hoarse from grief. Martin slid the draft toward me an hour later. "There's one more thing," he said. "Would you like to include a personal letter?" I looked at him. "What do you mean?" "Sometimes people find it helpful to leave something that explains the why." A letter that doesn't change the legal standing, but gives emotional context. I nodded. Yes. I'd like that. That night, I sat at my desk with a pen and a blank page. It took me nearly 2 hours to write just a few paragraphs. Caleb. This isn't how I imagine things ending. I never wanted us to be strangers. I gave you everything I had, and when that wasn't enough, I gave more. I raised you alone, but never without love. Maybe I made mistakes. I'm sure I did. But I never stopped showing up. Never stopped believing you'd come back. You didn't. This decision isn't revenge. It's recognition. Of who we are now. Of how far you've drifted from the values your mother and I tried to plant in you. I still hope you find your way. But I can't be the soil anymore. You dug me up. Goodbye, son. Dad. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the folder marked Final. Then I slid it into the safe beneath my bedroom floorboards, along with the new will. When I returned to Martin's office to sign everything the next morning, he was already waiting with the witnesses. 2 people I didn't know, one a young woman with thick glasses, the other a man about my age who looked like he'd seen a few wars of his own. They watched me sign in silence. No pomp. No ceremony. Just a pen, some paper, and the end of a legacy. When it was done, Martin handed me a copy. You okay? He asked, his tone measured. I don't know, I said honestly. But I feel clear. Walking back to the truck, the spring air felt sharper than usual. Like the world had shifted. I climbed into the driver's seat and just sat there for a moment, staring at the steering wheel. Guilt swirled in my gut like a storm cloud, but underneath it was something else. Something steadier. Resolve. I had spent too long hoping for someone to treat me the way I treated them. But sometimes, the best way to love someone, especially when they no longer love you back, is to let them go. It came on a Monday. Gray skies. Cold wind. One of those days where even the coffee tastes a little bitter. I was halfway through organizing the shed, figuring out which old tools to donate, which ones still had life in them, when I heard the ping from my phone. A message. Not from Caleb this time, but from a name I didn't recognize, Holloway, Gloria. The message read. Mr. Holmes, we've just been informed that Caleb's tuition payment was declined. Since he mentioned you were the previous financial contact, I assumed there had been a misunderstanding. Please advise when the payment will be made to avoid late fees. I stared at the screen, rereading the words until they blurred. A misunderstanding? I stepped into the kitchen, sat down at the table I'd sanded and stained with my own hands 20 years ago, and replied. There is no misunderstanding. I am no longer responsible for Caleb's tuition. That was his decision, not mine. She didn't reply. But an hour later, Caleb did. What are you doing? You can't just abandon me mid-semester. I've got deadlines. Housing. Madison's family is freaking out. No greeting. No apology. Just panic, because the safety net had finally been pulled. I didn't respond right away. I let the message sit there, glowing on the screen while I stared out the window at the bare trees swaying in the wind. Then I typed. You made it very clear I'm not part of your life anymore. You blocked my number. You changed your billing. You erased me. I'm just following through. A minute passed. Then another. Then the reply came. So this is your idea of parenting? Abandonment? And that was it. That one word, abandonment, lit a fuse I didn't know I still carried. I stood up so fast the chair scraped backward. My heart pounded in my ears as I stared at the screen like it might catch fire from the weight of my anger. I had given up everything for that boy. Nights. Sleep. Savings. Hell, even my own happiness. And now he was accusing me of abandonment because I refused to bankroll his entitlement? I picked up my coat, grabbed the folder with the new will, and walked out the front door. I didn't know exactly where I was headed, but I knew I needed air. Space. Somewhere I could breathe. I ended up at the cemetery. Marjorie's grave looked the same, simple, peaceful, flowers slightly wilted in the chilled wind. I stood there for a long time, hands in my pockets, the weight of the folder heavy under my arm. I did what we promised, I whispered. I gave him everything I had. The wind rustled the trees behind me like a soft reply. But he's not the boy we raised anymore, I said. He's not the man you hoped he'd be. I knelt down, fingers brushing the cold edge of her stone. I need to do something that'll break your heart a little. But I think it's the only way I'll survive. The wind fell still, like it understood. That night, I packed up every document, tuition receipts, email printouts, screenshots of messages. I wasn't preparing for a fight. I was preparing for closure. I knew exactly what I'd do next. He had chosen to cut me out. But now? Now I would show him what life looked like without the man he called Dad. For real. For good. It was Madison's graduation dinner. A friend of mine from the local VFW, his daughter worked at the university, tipped me off. Whole thing's being catered, he said. Parents and friends, fancy speeches, lots of cameras. Thought you might want to know. I didn't respond right away. I just sat there with the phone pressed to my ear, the silence stretching too long. But when I hung up, I knew. It was time. I ironed my best shirt. Polished my shoes. Packed my folder neatly with every document, every message, every memory that had led me to this point. Then I wrote one last note, and slipped it inside a sealed envelope. When I arrived at the event, it was just getting dark. The restaurant was lit with golden lights, tables covered in white linen. I could hear laughter spilling out onto the patio as I stood at the edge of the lot. I didn't walk in right away. I watched. Caleb was near the center table, wearing a suit that didn't quite fit right, probably borrowed. Madison stood next to him, glass in hand, telling a story that had everyone chuckling politely. I saw her parents too, standing off to the side, stiff with pride. And then I stepped forward. Conversations quieted as I entered. Some turned their heads. Others kept talking, unaware. But Caleb saw me. His smile faltered. I walked up slowly, without raising my voice, without making a scene. Just a calm, even pace, like I had every right to be there. Because I did. Caleb, I said. He blinked, like he couldn't believe it was me. What are you doing here? I came to return something, I said, holding out the envelope. He didn't take it. So I placed it gently on the table in front of him. Inside, I said, you'll find a copy of my updated will, documentation confirming my removal from your tuition records, and a letter. One that I hope you'll read when you're ready. Madison shifted uncomfortably. Her mother leaned toward her father, whispering. Caleb looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. You don't belong here, he said quietly, anger flickering behind his eyes. I nodded. That's clear now. But I did once. He said nothing. You made your decision when you blocked my number. When you replaced me on your records. When you erased me from your life. His jaw clenched. I didn't erase you. You tried, I replied. But let me be clear. This isn't revenge. It's closure. A hush fell over the crowd around us. Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. I took a deep breath. I gave you everything, Caleb. I loved you more than I loved myself. But I won't keep giving to someone who sees me as disposable. He looked away, jaw tight. I hope you become the man your mother believed you could be, I said, softer now. But I won't be waiting for that day anymore. I turned to leave. Just before I reached the door, a voice called out behind me. Wait. I paused. But I didn't turn around. You'll regret this, he said, the words sharp. I let them hang there. Then I walked out into the night. I didn't cry. Not this time. I didn't rage. I just felt finished. For the first time in years. The following day, I deposited the last of the college savings into the scholarship fund paperwork Martin and I had drawn up. The check cleared by noon. By evening, I was sitting on my porch, watching the sky shift from blue to gold. No calls came. No apologies. Just silence. And for once, I welcomed it. Do you think the father made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. The house was quieter than usual after the dinner. Not just physically, no phone ringing, no footsteps, but a different kind of quiet. The kind that seeps into your bones and rearranges the air around you. The kind you don't fight anymore. I'd always hated silence after Marjorie passed. It echoed too loudly in every room, reminded me of what wasn't there. But now? Now the silence felt earned. Like I'd closed a door and was finally allowed to sit in the stillness without guilt clawing at me. The town was buzzing, of course. Mrs. Langford stopped me at the mailbox. Heard you went to that fancy dinner, she said, narrowing her eyes. I nodded. Didn't stay long. She gave a small, approving grunt. Good for you. At the hardware store, Dale behind the counter said, didn't think you had it in you. He offered a half smile. Not that I blame you. The whispers didn't bother me. Let them talk. Let them speculate. What mattered was that for the first time in years, I wasn't living in a state of apology. I spent the next few days fixing up the shed, tightening hinges, oiling old tools, reorganizing things that hadn't moved in a decade. There was peace in the movement, in doing something that didn't revolve around waiting for someone else to call me Dad. Every evening I'd walk out to the old swing on the porch, cup of tea in hand, and watch the neighborhood shift with the setting sun. Kids biked past, dogs barked in the distance, and the world kept moving. Without me needing to chase after it. One morning, as I was pulling weeds by the garden bed, I heard the gate creak. I turned, expecting it to be the mailman. But it was Grace, Sarah Langford's granddaughter. 11 years old, always wore a baseball cap 2 sizes too big and carried a sketchpad like it was glued to her. Hi, Mr. Holmes, she said. Hey there, Grace, I replied, brushing dirt from my gloves. What brings you by? She held out a drawing. It was a picture of a big tree, crooked and sprawling, with a man sitting underneath it reading a book. That's you, she said. I saw you the other day with a book out here, and I wanted to draw it. I took the paper gently, my throat tightening. That's really kind of you. She shrugged. You looked peaceful. She sat with me for a bit. Talked about school, about how her parents were always arguing, about how sometimes she just liked to walk here because it was quieter. You can come by any time, I said softly. I've got tea and cookies most afternoons. She grinned. Cool. That's how it started. First Grace. Then a few other neighborhood kids who'd seen her sitting out front. I helped one with his math homework, lent another a wrench to fix his busted bike. Nothing formal. Just people, passing through, sharing small pieces of time and kindness. The house felt warmer. Not full, not noisy, but warm. One afternoon, I found myself at the kitchen counter, flipping through old photo albums. There was Caleb at 5, dressed as a pirate. Caleb at 12, winning his first science fair ribbon. Caleb at 17, laughing as he pushed me into the lake during one of our last camping trips. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just looked. Those photos belonged to a time that was real. A version of him that had existed. Maybe still did, buried under something I couldn't reach anymore. The next day, I walked down to the Veterans Center. Signed up to volunteer once a week, just helping with food prep, talking to folks, sharing stories. Most of the guys were older than me, but a few were young and aimless, the kind of kids who needed someone to ask about their day without needing a reason. It felt good to listen. To be useful. I never spoke about Caleb there. Never mentioned the dinner, the will, or the years of quiet pain. I just chopped onions, played cards, and sat in silence when that was what someone needed most. One evening, walking home from the center, I stopped by the cemetery again. Marjorie's grave had fresh flowers, a neighbor, I assumed. I sat on the bench nearby and watched the light fade behind the hill. "I think I'm okay," I whispered to her. "I think I'm healing." The wind moved gently through the grass. A soft answer. I stood, took one last look at her stone, and turned toward home. The idea came quietly. Not in a burst of inspiration, but in the middle of folding laundry. A towel, Caleb's old bedsheet, one of Marjorie's aprons I still kept around for no good reason. I looked at the folded pile and thought, this house has too many rooms and not enough stories anymore. That night, I sat in my armchair, sipping tea, staring at the hallway that led to the guest room, Caleb's old room, and the little space Marjorie once called her reading nook. All of them full of ghosts and silence. I needed purpose. I needed people. Not just visitors. Community. The next morning, I made a list. At the top, I wrote, Marjorie's House Project. It was just a name. But it felt right. I started calling around, to the church, the Veterans Center, the local school. Asked questions. Took notes. What kind of help did young people need in this town? What gaps weren't being filled? Turned out, there were more than a few. There was a 19-year-old who'd aged out of the foster system and was sleeping in his car behind the diner. A single mom attending night classes who couldn't afford evening childcare. A high school kid who walked 3 miles to school because her grandma's health was failing and no one else could drive. I didn't have millions. But I had a house. A kitchen. Time. And a heart that had more to give, even if it was a little bruised. So I made more calls. To zoning offices. Legal aids. Insurance people. I asked Martin to help me draft a new document, a provision that would allow my home, after I passed, to legally transition into a small non-profit residence for youth in crisis or transition. But I didn't want to wait until after I was gone. I wanted to start now. I cleared out Caleb's room first. It was strange, packing away his old posters, dusty trophies, and childhood books. Each item felt like letting go of a different version of him, one I missed more than he'd ever know. I boxed everything up with care. Labeled it, Caleb's Childhood, for storage. Not for disposal. Not yet. Then I painted. Cleaned. Bought new linens. Replaced the old desk with a sturdier one from the thrift store. Hung up a small framed quote Marjorie used to love, "Be someone's safe place." Room by room, I brought the house back to life. Not with things, but with intention. Helen from church donated a twin mattress. The VFW put me in touch with a young man named Marco, quiet, polite, recently discharged, and out of options. He moved in the following week. Didn't say much the first few days. Just nodded a lot, kept his head down. But he cleaned up after himself, took short showers, and asked if it was okay to use the back porch for morning stretches. I told him it was his home now, too. Then came Tara, the student teacher at the school who needed a temporary room until her new lease started. Then Evan, the teenager who wanted somewhere quiet to study and crash a few nights a week while his grandmother recovered. Before I knew it, the house had a rhythm again. Footsteps in the hallway. Laughter from the kitchen. A knock on the bathroom door. It wasn't noise, it was life. We started having dinners together. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti or baked chicken, sometimes soup and sandwiches. But we sat around the table. Talked. Shared stories. Not everyone had something to say, but everyone listened when someone did. One night, as we cleared the dishes, Marco turned to me and said, "You didn't have to do this, you know." "I did," I said. "Why?" "I thought about Caleb. About everything I had lost. About everything I was building." "Because someone should," I replied. "And because I can." I didn't need to say more. That same evening, I found myself writing a new letter to Marjorie. Just a short one. Tucked it under the drawer in the kitchen, our old hiding spot for notes. "They're good kids, Marge. They talk too fast and leave socks everywhere, but they're kind. They say thank you. They ask how I'm doing. It's not the family we imagined, but it's a family just the same." Outside, the porch light glowed warm against the night air. Inside, someone was humming a tune I hadn't heard in years. And for the first time since Caleb left, I didn't feel alone. It started with little things. Evan, the high schooler, brought me a handmade card that said, "Thank you for letting me stay. You saved my GPA, and maybe my life." Tara left a pie on the counter with a sticky note, "Still learning how to bake. Apologies in advance if you lose a filling." Marco fixed the front steps without being asked. One afternoon, I came home from the grocery store to find him sanding the railing, humming quietly to himself. They weren't my blood. But in all the ways that matter, they were my people. There were no grand declarations, no formal rules. Just the unspoken agreement that this house, my house, Marjorie's house, was a safe place. A quiet place. A place where people asked how your day went and actually listened to the answer. It changed me. I no longer woke up dreading silence. Now, I heard coffee being made. Doors creaking open. Laughter echoing from the back porch where someone inevitably forgot to bring a sweater and was borrowing mine. One evening, I caught Marco sitting on the swing outside, staring at the stars. "Everything all right?" I asked, stepping onto the porch. He nodded. "Just thinking about how I didn't expect to end up here." I sat beside him. "Me neither." He chuckled. "Yeah, but you live here." I paused. Living somewhere and feeling at home, not always the same thing. He looked at me then. "You feel at home now?" I nodded slowly. For the first time in a long time. That week, we started referring to the place as Marjorie's house. It was Tara's idea. "She's the reason you're like this, isn't she?" she asked one night as we were folding laundry. I smiled. "She's the reason I didn't give up." So we made a sign, nothing fancy, just a wooden plank Marco painted with careful hands, and hung it by the front gate. Marjorie's house. People started noticing. Word got around. A few neighbors dropped by with donations, spare bedding, books, unopened canned goods. One even left a small potted plant with a note, "For a home that grows good people." It wasn't all perfect. There were dishes left in the sink, late-night arguments over who used all the hot water, and the occasional slammed door when someone needed space. But it was real. It was honest. And every night, we gathered for dinner like we belonged to something. Because we did. One afternoon, as I was trimming the hedges, I noticed a car idling across the street. Dark blue sedan. California plates. It didn't move for several minutes. Then, slowly, the door opened. It was Caleb's daughter, Ella. She stepped out cautiously, as if unsure if she should be there. 16 now, maybe 17. I hadn't seen her since she was a toddler, years before the silence took over. She walked up to the gate and looked at the sign. "This was Grandma's house?" she asked. I nodded. "Still is, in spirit." She bit her lip. "Dad didn't want me coming here." I waited. "But I saw something online, about the house helping people. And I thought, maybe." She trailed off. "You're always welcome here," I said, opening the gate. I brought her inside. Gave her a tour. Introduced her to the others. Tara showed her the art room she'd set up in the old office. Evan offered her one of the cookies he'd accidentally burned. Marco nodded respectfully, then excused himself. He wasn't much for crowds. We sat in the living room after. She looked around at the photos, the quiet, the warmth. "Dad says you hate him now," she said suddenly. I took a breath. "I don't hate him," I said. "But I couldn't keep hurting myself to stay in his life." She was quiet a long time. Then she whispered, "He's not happy." That hit harder than I expected. "He's angry a lot," she said. "And tired. He doesn't really talk about you. Or anyone. It's like he built this bubble around himself." I nodded. "I know the feeling." She looked up. "Can I visit again? Maybe help out?" "You can do more than visit," I said, smiling. "You can belong." That evening, she joined us for dinner. Said grace, even though no one asked her to. Washed dishes without being told. Before she left, she hugged me tightly. "Thanks, Grandpa," she said. I hadn't heard that word in years. After she left, I sat on the porch and watched the last light fade from the sky. Inside, I heard laughter. Chairs scraping. The sound of someone playing the piano off-key. And I realized, I had built something. Not from money. Not from obligation. From love. From memory. From starting over. Real family isn't who you're born to. It's who shows up when the world goes quiet. It was a quiet Saturday morning when the knock came. I was in the kitchen making scrambled eggs, the kind Marjorie used to call cloudy yellow. Tara was asleep on the couch, having pulled another double shift at the school. Marco was out back fixing the fence. Evan had gone to visit his grandmother for the weekend. The house was still, warm with morning light. The knock was soft. Hesitant. Like someone wasn't sure they should be there. I wiped my hands and opened the door. Caleb stood on the porch, looking smaller than I remembered. Not physically, he'd grown broader, filled out like men do in their 30s, but emotionally. He looked like a boy who'd been carrying too much weight for too long. "Hey," he said, barely above a whisper. I didn't say anything. Just stepped aside. He walked in slowly, like he was expecting to be pushed out at any moment. He glanced around the living room, at the books stacked neatly on the coffee table, the framed photo of Marjorie on the mantel, the pair of muddy sneakers by the door that weren't his. "This place looks," he stopped, searching for the word. "Alive." I nodded. "It is." He sat down on the edge of the armchair, hands clasped tightly between his knees. "I saw Ella's drawings," he said finally. "The ones she posted online. Said she's been coming here. Volunteering. She's got talent," I said. "And a good heart." He nodded, staring at the floor. "I didn't come to fight. I didn't expect you to." Long pause. "Then, you hurt me, you know." I met his eyes. "And you hurt me." He flinched a little. "I know." We sat in silence. The kind of silence that's heavy with history, with things unsaid. "I didn't block you because I hated you," he said. "I blocked you because I didn't know how to deal with who I was becoming. With how much I'd disappointed you." I breathed in deeply. You didn't disappoint me by becoming someone different. You disappointed me when you stopped being someone who cared. He nodded slowly. Fair. More silence. The eggs on the stove started to burn. I turned off the heat, not bothering to save them. I'm not here to ask for money, he said. Or a place in your will. I figured that ship sailed. It did. But I am here to say I'm sorry. That caught me off guard. I'm sorry for the years I disappeared, he continued. For the way I treated you. For letting my pride win. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but I didn't. I just felt tired. And strangely, at peace. I don't hate you, I said. But I can't go back to pretending nothing happened. He nodded. I don't expect you to. We sat a while longer. Eventually, I stood up and walked over to the drawer in the sideboard. Pulled out a small envelope, creased at the edges, sealed with tape. His name written in my handwriting across the front. This is the letter I left in the wool packet, I said. The one I handed you at the dinner. He took it. Turned it over in his hands. I never opened it. That's up to you. He slipped it into his coat pocket. Then he stood. I don't know what happens next. Neither do I said. But you know where the door is. And if you want to knock again, you can. His eyes welled up, but he blinked it back. He reached out, slowly, and we shook hands. Not a hug. Not yet. But something real. Then he left. Later that evening, Ella came by. She sat on the porch swing beside me, holding a sketchbook full of new drawings, kids laughing, a dog chasing birds, a woman who looked suspiciously like Marjorie holding a tray of cookies. Dad said he saw you, she said. I nodded. She looked at me carefully. Do you think he'll come back? I think he's learning how to, I said. And that was enough. Would you have accepted the apology? Share your thoughts below. The ribbon cutting wasn't extravagant, just a few folding chairs, 2 long tables covered in dollar store tablecloths, and a punch bowl that kept attracting bees. But to me, it might as well have been a royal ceremony. We had a speaker from the Veterans Center. The school principal said a few words. Even the mayor showed up, mostly because her niece had been staying with us for the past 3 months while escaping a rough home situation. The banner above the porch read, Marjorie's house, a place to begin again. I stood back most of the morning, watching the kids I'd taken in scatter across the yard, helping set up, laughing, catching up with some of the volunteers who'd been part of the process. Tara was in charge of refreshments. Marco had organized the toolshed like it was a military barracks. Evan, now 18 and beaming with the confidence I once feared he'd never have, ran around snapping pictures on a borrowed camera. We even had music, local high school band kids, nervous but proud, playing Lean on Me like it was their national anthem. And then, toward the end of the event, someone handed me the microphone. I didn't plan on speaking. I don't much like the sound of my own voice in front of a crowd. But as I stood there, faces looking up from their folding chairs, I thought about Marjorie. About the promises I'd made her, the ones I'd broken, and the ones I had finally, after all these years, managed to keep. So I spoke. This house was built in 1977. My wife Marjorie picked the wallpaper. I built the fence with my own hands. We raised 1 son here. We buried 1 dog under the oak tree. We never had much, but we had enough. I paused. A few people nodded. A breeze moved through the crowd. Life doesn't always go the way you think it will, I continued. People change. Sometimes they leave. Sometimes they come back. But if you're lucky, and if you listen, you'll realize home isn't just a place. It's a choice. A promise you make to keep showing up, even when it hurts. I looked at the sign. Then at the porch. Then back at the people who had filled my life with something I hadn't felt in years. "This isn't just a house," I said. "This is Marjorie's house. And as long as I'm breathing, it will be a place where no one has to knock more than once." The crowd clapped. Not a roaring ovation, just steady, warm, genuine. Afterwards, I sat on the porch swing with Ella. She'd helped decorate the front steps with fresh daisies and sunflowers, Marjorie's favorite. "You think Grandma would be proud?" she asked. I looked around. At the kids eating cookies on the grass. At Marco laughing, really laughing, with a couple of church volunteers. At Tara helping a nervous parent fill out an application for their son to stay for the summer. "I think she'd be home," I said. A few days later, I wrote one final letter. Not for anyone else. Just for her. "Marjorie. We did it. The house is full again. Not with noise, but with hope. The kind you always believed in. I couldn't save our son from himself. But I did what we promised. I didn't let my heart close. I kept it open, even when it hurt. They call it Marjorie's house now. I hope that makes you smile wherever you are. They ask about you, sometimes. I tell them you were the kind of woman who could make a stranger feel seen just by pouring them tea. I tell them you believed in second chances. And in homes that could be built again. Thank you for loving me long enough to teach me how to keep loving, even after you were gone. Until we meet again. H. That evening, I folded the letter and placed it in her favorite book, now resting on the shelf above the fireplace. I poured myself a glass of sweet tea and stepped out onto the porch. The sun was setting over the oak tree. The porch lights flickered on one by one. Inside, laughter rang through the hallway. And in that golden light, I knew. Marjorie's house had finally come alive again. The way it was always meant to be.